Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, continued tinkering along the offensive line. How did it work out this most recent time around? And we get to the MASH unit known as the Texas Tech secondary. Is there a justified hope for a return to health this week? We investigate next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us again as we are kicking off a new week, a road week for the Red Raiders, as this week we'll begin to turn our attention to the Arizona Wildcats, who had one of the biggest wins of the weekend, anywhere, anyhow, as they take down a top 10 team on the road in the Utes of Utah. We're all tore up to see that for Utah. Just really feeling for you guys this week. But before we get to looking Wildcat way, still processing some of what we saw on Saturday as the Red Raiders down the Bearcats 44-41 on Saturday night. We'll get to the slate that's upcoming in the next few weeks for Texas Tech as the meat of your Big 12 schedule, obviously still out in front of you. And I want to get to some of the status there as far as the MASH unit known as our defensive secondary, already hobbled, missing a few guys going into the game. And then we see more guys leaving the game. One of those does return, but another does not. So we'll get to the latest there and what we're anticipating moving forward on that front. But I want to get back to something that we mentioned on the reaction episode following the game, Chris, and that was maybe the biggest story as far as changes going into the game. A new look offensive line as you had a little bit of a shuffle there, left to right. Once again, you went with Dalton Merriman, Sterling Porsche back in the mix as a starter, Sheridan Wilson at center, Davion Carter at right guard, and we saw Caleb Rogers at right tackle. So he returns to the right side, and I'm kind of wondering, what was, and it may just be speculative on your part, but I'm wondering what was the bigger impetus to making this change? Was it Buchanan not meeting what they wanted him to meet as a tackle? Was it Caleb Rogers as a left guard that they're saying, we got to get this guy back on the right side? I'll give you an option C, all of the above. How would you describe some of, I guess, the thought process behind making that change to begin with?
I think probably a combination of things. There's probably an all of the above component. I think that Caleb Rogers can play guard. I just don't know if that experiment worked. So when you start looking at that and then you factor in, well, he's best on the right side. He said it. Joey said it. That's where he feels most comfortable. I think so no guard, right side. Well, it's really right tackle. And then I think Porsche is a good football player that they're trying to, and this is part of coaching. You're trying to, he's never done this before. This is all brand new to him. He's never played guard in a college game before until the game versus Cincinnati. He'd only really practiced it the week leading up and just kind of seeing what it looked like. I can't say that it looked bad at all. I think it looked pretty good. I think that'll continue to be a process, but he's older. I think he's one of the guys you went and got. You're trying to get all the talent, because they always say it's just really figure out a way to get your best five on the field. And then we have to figure out where that fits. And maybe that's the answer you're getting right here. Maybe ultimately, are these our best five? I think, Ty Buchanan is the one that got squeezed. I think he can play because I think here's probably what's tricky is that the week before, and I'm just going off of what Joey and Zach said to the media in front of everybody, tackles didn't play very well. Didn't grade out very well. And like Buchanan's probably going, well, why does Dalton get to keep his spot? Why am I the one that gets squeezed? And that there's probably a lot of nuances and all that, but Porsche had missed some time. He's back ready to go. So I just think this is kind of how you landed and gave it a shot. I think the result's pretty good. I would assume that it stays this way for the time being. You now have some depth. You've got this is just going to continue to be a thing until it's not. Maybe we look up a month from now and go, well, you found something. This is how it stayed, and you're good. But I can't even really say that this is what you're gonna, that get out the Sharpie and this is your permanent solution. I just don't know if we're there yet. But early return is pretty darn good here with your reshuffled group up front.
Yeah, and how about the thought of like, all right, guys, we're going to try something new. Sterling, we want you to play a position you've never played on this level. Oh, and by the way, maybe the biggest challenge, and I don't know if there's any maybe about it, that you face so far this year is going to be waiting for you there on Saturday night. So I was trying to keep that in mind as we're watching the game on Saturday, and you see this miss or this breakdown or whatever, and Sheridan Wilson certainly had his hands full going the wrong direction a couple of different times. And you're thinking, oh boy, here we go again. It's kind of more of the same, but trying to keep in mind the context of the fact that you were facing some really salty dudes across the line of scrimmage.
6'1", 330.
That is mound.
He is a large human, and he's very smart. I mean, he's just a bigger, probably a better version of what Jalen Hutchings was for you or Tony Bradford was for you for all these years. I mean, he's bigger than those guys. Ticks better than those guys. This is an NFL prospect, and God, he's a load. I mean, he's a load.
And played up to his billing. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But, one thing that I'm really enjoying seeing, and obviously will be expected to continue, and I think has to continue, you've mentioned it several times, is the tight end impact on not only the ground game, but some protection there as well on occasion. I don't know how you get around not having that. And it kind of seemed like once upon a time, it was like, all right, well, we're going to have a running back. We're going to have 4 wide receivers. And these 5, good luck to you up front along the offensive line. Now, some years it worked. Some years you had some really good offensive lines, and maybe you didn't need that additional help. But it is scratching me right where I itch to see some variations within that. I love seeing the tight ends return to the fold. And I just think about where we might be if that was not the case. So obviously we'll continue. And did you say on the reaction episode that Mason Tharp, I don't know where he was on the snap count list for the offense at large, but he was well ahead of his other tight end colleagues, right? And I think for a good reason.
I think played just under I think you had 65 offensive plays. I think he played close to 50 snaps.
Gotcha.
I mean, and I hope people are understanding and appreciative of what he means to what you're trying to get done here. I can tell you that Taj Brooks does, Zach Kitley does, Baron Morton does. He has the one catch, but I mean, I just, and Conyers is doing a variety of things in other ways that you kind of see. I mean, like the Wildcat stuff and the shovel pass and doing some things in the red zone specifically. Jalen has certainly gotten more involved in the blocking part of things. I think he's tried to up his game there. John Carlos Miller wasn't really heard from much in this game, but he was still, whether a decoy or blocker or whatever it may be, you're using all those pieces. And I go back to last year when how hard it was offensively, and you just think about, remember how many games you didn't have Mason Tharp? Like 5 or 6 games. And then we've talked about the lack of juice at wideout based on Josh Kelly's come in and essentially replaced all of the ones that are producing elsewhere out there that transferred out. I mean, coming into a week ago, he had eclipsed them all in yards and catches, and he's done nothing in the last 2 weeks to hurt those numbers, you wouldn't think. But it's just crazy how you were still able to put a decent product on the field offensively when you see what this looks like. Imagine if you could get that offensive line aspect figured out to where you didn't need to max protect or keep tight ends in to help and all those things. But yeah, I mean, it's taken an army, and I just think that you're showing defenses a variety of different schemes on offense. Different runs concepts, different passing concepts. The RPO stuff has been a pain to try to defend. And all those things, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun to try to see what they're doing, because it's a little bit different each week depending on what they're having to go against. But yeah, Dante Corleone, you have my respect, sir. I would not say anything unkind to you. I can assure you of that. But I hope you had a safe trip back. to Cincy. I hope that you're no longer playing for the Bearcats when the Red Raiders make their return trip to Nippert Stadium in 2027.
No doubt. I mean, a big ask for a new sort of group. I know there's some obviously similar faces still in the mix, but a big ask to go against that first time out. But you would like to think it's going to pay some big dividends to go against that and survive it the first time out, because I'm not sure that you're going to see something very similar against Arizona. No disrespect to them, but in watching their ball game late Saturday night against Utah, after watching Cincinnati's front, I'm thinking, all right, this doesn't look exactly the same. I don't necessarily see the dawn in the middle for them, but obviously plenty to provide a challenge. And we'll get into more of what the Wildcats will present as the week goes on. Before we get to some of the issues in the secondary defensively and some of that injury related, maybe some of it not, I don't know, maybe everything's impacted by what you got going on from an injury standpoint. But Chris, I think one thing that we didn't really dive into on the reaction episode and has to be mentioned also. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching the game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. One thing that we didn't really dive into on the reaction episode and has to be mentioned also when speaking about the offense, and you mentioned it partially when you're talking about RPOs, but other situations as well. You got to have a quarterback who is processing things very, very quickly and making smart decisions at the line of scrimmage, whether it's pre-snap or it's in those RPO situations. And I know I heard his head coach on Saturday night talking about being really happy with some of the calls that Baron Morton was making.
Yeah, I just think right now you have a QB that understands what's around him, understands what you're trying to get done, is really taking care of the football. And you know what the scary thing is too is I just don't, based on what I've seen to this point, you're not really a team, I don't think, that's built to be able to come back from a big lead. And here's why. Everything that what you're doing right now offensively, and it works, is because you're just so balanced. It all plays off of each other. And if you have to remove one aspect or the other because of the score per se, that would make me nervous, just because it's not allowed to work in sync and play off of each other and all those things. You follow me?
Yeah.
Because I just think that Taj just making everybody's job easier. Then in turn, Barron and the whiteouts make Taj's job easier. And it just kind of, it's the teeter-totter effect, if you will, I guess. But that's the good and the bad, if you will. But I just think it's pretty darn balanced. And it's a lot of fun to watch because at different aspects of the game, depending on whether you need to, okay, we're in 2 minutes, we need to air it out, let's go, or let's slow it down and let's sit on it and let's hand it to the big fella and let him do his thing. You're able to kind of, lean into that versatility a bit. So that's been fun to watch. And I do worry that you would have to get away from some of that. And I don't know how you would handle that. I don't think fairly or very well if it gets to that point, but maybe you never get down again the rest of this year. Sign me up for some of that, but your QB's playing really good right now. I absolutely agree. And I wish his receivers would have helped him a bit more on some of those drives, but hey, Barron's probably misfired on some passes, and those guys are probably saying, I wish my QB would help me. That's just kind of how it works.
Well, I think it's a good point to bring up, and probably something to consider also is the context of when in the game, that big deficit would be there, because it was 14-3 at one point in time, and you are big play capable, and you kind of got back to that against Cincinnati when it wasn't there necessarily against Arizona State. I don't know if I would call you a quick strike offense necessarily, but thank God you have found some guys that can generate some big plays for you if you were to get into some of those situations. But I'm down with your game plan. Let's just never trail again. I like the sound of that. Let's get to what's happening defensively. And, I'm saying some of this may be impacted from an injury standpoint. At the same time, as I say it, I'm like, well, there were some games where you were healthy where you were also struggling from a pass defense standpoint. So I don't know. I guess interpret it however you would like, but certainly not made any easier whenever Braylon Lux is not on the field. Jalen Peoples not in the mix either. It is the Macho Show in a big, big way again on Saturday. And then as the game progresses, unfortunately, we see the injury bug extend elsewhere. One of the best players that you've had on your defense, on your team so far this year, Chapman Lewis, leaves the game. And then we get into situations with Jordan Sanford, and then all of a sudden, I'll be darned, he's walking to the locker room. And so then we get to Joseph Plunk. Now, we did see Sanford back in the mix, but I don't know, week to week, there's some different big storylines to pay attention to. That might be right near the top of my list this week, Chris, is not only looking at those cornerbacks, looking at Braylon Lux, but also now looking at those safeties. So what did you see? What did you hear as the game was going on? And I know we're very early on in the week, so I don't know if we have any guess for what this week could look like, but give me a feel for some of what you're thinking about those spots this week in the secondary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, take a big breath.
I know. Yeah. This is, you were already young and inexperienced. I think you felt like you had depth and some athleticism and speed and a lot of upside. I think generally speaking, your group has gotten better at times. And some of this is not necessarily these guys' fault on how they've played, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because some of it may fall on the group in front of them rushing the passer, but we'll get into that in a second. But as far as just availability and personnel, yeah, Chapman Lewis came over, I don't know, late first, early second quarter to the sideline. A lot of conversation going on, a lot of, talking into the deal from the trainers and everything. And he's just and I didn't see anything like visible that they're looking at, but it was just pretty clear that, okay, he's not really going back in right now. And I think then he kind of disappeared from my vision. So I assume they took him to the locker room. And then, you heard Joey say after the game, hamstring. Damn. These are not, and I think that's what Lux is dealing with as well, according to what Joey has said. And those are just tricky, pulled, strained, whatever. It's just with a guy that tries to open up and is running in the open field a lot and needs to stop and start quickly. Those are just dicey. And it just, sometimes they linger and they nag, and you have to overcompensate by how long you rest a kid to ensure that, because it could just nag the whole way through if you don't ever let it heal. So there's that. Then Jordan Sanford comes over. He's got a bloody hand. I didn't get a good look at it. I kind of went the other way as they kind of came over there. I didn't know what was going on. We never got an official report, other than I think that the official word was he's questionable to return, or he could come back. So phrase that however you want. And so he disappeared from my vision for a while, and Plunk is out there, who's going to be a coach. His dad's the head coach at Emerald Tascosa, has done a phenomenal job. His dad's name's Ken. Joseph is like one of those high IQ, typical Tech players that squeezes everything out of what he's got. He could draw up anything that you're trying to run, knows what everybody's supposed to be doing, but he's not as big and not as fast as some of the other guys. So he's there's some limitations there. And so he's out there for a couple of 3 series, and then, you get Sanford back with a kind of a clubbed up, his thumb appears to be wrapped up and everything like that, because the interception went right to him, and everybody's like, oh, dude, how can you not catch it? I'm like, well, you go try to catch it with that thing on your thumb. Like, cut him some slack, man. I mean, I don't know what he's dealing with, but he's kind of got 1.5 hands out there trying to catch a ball coming at him really, really fast. So, yeah, it could have theoretically ended the game right there, but that position's it makes me a bit nervous going into next week. I don't know what you're going to deal with on Chapman. I don't know what Sanford going to look at this week. And obviously, I think even Joey said something about plunking his shoulder. So,
of course.
And then, to your point, no Lux. Hopeful that he's back this week. I think what Joey said after the game. No Peoples, although I will say that I think Macho has passed Jalen Peoples. There's still a Devin Cromwell. Because here's what we reported in the pregame show that they had actually told us, and we kind of indicated we're going through the injuries and things like that before the game actually started on the broadcast, is that Jordan Sanford was actually one of your backups at corner going into that game because Peoples and Lux were out. And had he moved ahead of Cromwell, would you rather use Sanford instead of Cromwell? You've got Isaiah Boss Collins as a redshirt, or he's redshirting now. He's a true freshman. So you're not a lot of options there at corner and slash free safety. Because your backup free safety was also a backup at corner. Now he may be backing up neither, depending on what his thumb looks like after they get out of the game and look at it, and maybe or maybe he can continue to play with that same situation. I don't know. Don't know about Chapman. Yeah, I don't know. I'm talking in circles now, but it's like the whole thing's stressing me out because it's hard enough as it is. And I just think part of it is you're asking those guys to do a lot because you can't get to the quarterback consistently.
Yeah, no. I before we get to that, I was really curious about that Sanford injury because the collision was Sorsby when he was already being tackled by somebody else. And there was a pretty good little pop there as he was going down and Sanford was like coming in as well. But the way that he was reacting on the field, like kind of kicking his feet, like he was in a lot of pain, didn't seem like, a head-to-head thing or a concussed type of thing. So I was wondering, is there something that got caught like between the face masks and maybe it was the hand? I had no idea, but then to see him come out.
It was his hand. Yeah. Ain't no doubt.
That makes a lot more sense as to his reaction because it seemed like he was in a lot of pain at that particular time. And maybe that's something that we could anticipate over the course of a week can kind of be dealt with. But, man, I don't want to see Chapman Lewis on the sideline. I don't want to see Braylon Lux on the sideline any further, but that's kind of been the case. And thankfully you have survived some of those outings where that has had to be the case. But I don't know if you're familiar with Arizona's passing game. And I don't know if it's too early in the week to get familiar with it, but you're going to need to be at full tilt against those guys. Pretty salty. Pass rush wise. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. Of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Pass rush-wise, rinse and repeat the notes, I guess, from weeks prior. Close, no cigars. You got a quarterback moving around a little bit, and that's part of why I was really impressed with Sorsby. I thought he played really, really well for his team. And I guess there was some pressure, but how many sacks we're going to have at the end of the year? Like 5? I mean, the Ronald McDonald house is going to be suffering to high heaven this year if they're still doing that deal, like $1 for every sack or whatever they do. And I don't know what the call is other than to just get really creative if you're Tim DeRuyter. And we kind of saw that again on the pick 6 play with what he was able to do with Ben Roberts, but it ain't coming easy. And I think it's only going to get more and more difficult as the teams are better and better and better as we get further into Big 12 play. I have no easy answer for that one.
Yeah, Tim is having to pick his poison right now because I think you don't have anybody that can win consistently in one-on-one matchups on the defensive line. Look, I don't dislike your personnel per se. There's just nobody that has emerged as like elite or a difference maker consistently. And part of that is because, okay, so Adetore's out, Spencer's out, Esters has been out, Harvey Dyson missed a couple of games. So that's That's frustrating. Isaac Smith is trying to round back into form from when we last saw him a year and a half ago. I think each week it gets a bit better. The game slows down for him a bit. Your defensive tackles are okay. Thought DB Carroll played a great game. Quincy Ledette has been playing pretty good. You got Cofield rotating in there. Duda Banks has had his moments. But nobody is able to just – because here's your problem. If you want to dumb it down this way, you are not good enough right now to rush 4 and get home. That's really the problem. Yep. So you are having to get creative and you're having to blitz. Well, and what that does is if you don't get there, your guys on the back end are in a bind. And the quarterbacks to this point have been good enough to, I say that Levitt wasn't quite good enough to deliver the deep ball and some of the ones that they were there to be had. He just couldn't deliver it. Sorsby was. And that's really what concerns me because Fafita this weekend, Shedeur Sanders, if he's still healthy when you play Colorado, Hoover with TCU, Beck with Iowa State. You've got some more than capable quarterbacks that can run around, and if you give them time, you're in trouble. Just all there is to it. And until you kind of figure that out, because now your secondary is a bit beat up, and you're getting healthier up front, but it's just – I don't know if it's going to get healthy or better enough to where you can kind of go, man, we could just rush 4 or 5 and we're good. And we can, everybody else can kind of do their thing. Cause he's having to send a 5th or a 6th and in some cases even more than that to try to heat the guy up and manufacture pressure and get creative. But when you do that, you're taking a chance. It's all a gamble. It's like the field pressure call, that Joey's like, I hope we never see that again. But part of it is because you're trying to roll the dice, show the quarterback something he maybe hasn't seen. And in that particular case against Arizona State a week ago, he guessed right, knew the hot read, like 65 yards later, look out or whatever. So, but that's your secondary is going to get talked about poorly, and I get it. You're giving up a ton of passing yards. Maverick McIver lit you up. Sam Levitt lit you up, and it could have been worse. Obviously, Sorsby lit you up, but some of that it falls on the guys up front too. What's the answer? I don't know, and I don't know what you're going into personnel wise this weekend versus Arizona. But boy, I watched Noah Fafita on Saturday night late when I got home. Some of the throws that he made on the run while being pressured were special.
Crazy.
And that's, it makes me it makes my brow kind of glisten right now, sweating, thinking about it. Cause that could be a problem.
Hopefully he gets sleepy around 10 o'clock or whatever time it's going to be when you kick things off in Tucson coming up. We got plenty of time left this week to sweat that out. So we'll save some of that for some future episodes, I suppose. I do have one grand idea. Take the freaking football away. Covers up for a multitude of sins. And that's kind of been the saving grace, right? For Tech, I guess, so far this year defensively is you've done that. Yep. You hadn't just totally filled that bucket up, but you've done it fairly consistently. I mean, can you believe 2 pick sixes in 1 year? I remember going through like a decade where you couldn't even get a pick, much less a pick 6. So that's been really nice to see. It's going to have to continue. But man, there's no doubt that, like we've already said this week, the meat of your schedule is coming up. You took advantage of what you had early on, and thank God you survived those. But there are going to have to be a lot of things that increase as far as the level of your play, because the level of competition is certainly increasing. So looking forward to that challenge as well, because it comes with some big opportunity. I was hoping Arizona would pull it out for the sake of opportunity for Texas Tech. A great opportunity to get maybe the best win of the year if you're able to do it. But we're not at Jones Stadium, and it ain't Arizona State. It's Arizona. It's on the road, which has been a bugaboo in the Joey McGuire era.
And that game could theoretically end at 1:30 or 2 a.m. Central Time. That's lunacy to me.
It's college football. It's lunacy. The whole thing is Looney Tunes.
I mean, we're sitting there on Saturday night, and it's like 9:15, and you're late in the third quarter, and I'm like, boys, you're 45 minutes away from kickoff a week from now.
I know.
Like, what are we doing? But yeah, maybe Wildcats or whatever aren't good at nighttime. I don't know, but yeah, we'll talk about that this week. And I was rooting for them too. I think that you're right. That's best for you, for them to have won and all those things. But boy, they've got some. People could say what they want to about the Big 12 as a whole, but some of these individual pieces that we're seeing on some of these teams, I kind of go off of how the NFL views them, because they're the ultimate surveyor of talent. That's the ultimate league to try to be a part of. And they think very highly of a few of these Arizona pieces, and in fact, more than a few on both sides of the ball. So we'll get into some of that as we go along. But yeah, you're about to face a stiff test, but you kind of knew this going in. I mean, this is a preseason top 25 Arizona team, and they've had one hiccup on a Friday night in Manhattan. I've seen that movie before, but yeah, it's about to get real in a hurry. 3 of your next 4 are on the road.
Looking forward to the opportunity, man. This is what you do it for, is a chance to win a big game, and you got a big one in front of a national television audience, if their eyes are still open, coming up on Saturday night. So we'll have some thoughts to process from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire, as well as his coordinators, the next time we convene. And of course, we'll get to looking Arizona way as the week rolls along. So hope you'll join us for that. Chris, enjoyed it, man, as always, and we'll see you for the next one.
And I will say, I do hate that we have having to move on from our Lonnie Anderson mentions. It was great while it lasted, but we must now move on to something different as we turn the page to Cincinnati week or away from it. And now we look forward to Bear Down and the Wildcats and Tucson. And they have actually a cactus, in their logo, and they promote like the whole cactus in the desert thing, whereas we've kind of playfully adopted that after being, shot at from afar from other folks in the Big 12 and in a recruiting world. But anyway, just wanted to mention Lonnie. We appreciated the mentions or being able to talk about you, WKRP, and all that stuff. But yeah, we must move on now.
I don't know, man. It got us to a win, so maybe we'll just figure out a way to work her in once again. I'm wearing the same underwear all week, so I hope everybody's doing their part out there. And obviously that's a joke. I don't wear underwear, but you get the idea. Let's keep the routine going. All right, Chris, thank you so much, and appreciate everybody's time out there for joining us once again today. Thanks especially to those Matador Mob insiders chopping it up. As always, round the clock, your direct line to Chris and myself, if you so dare. Check out the show notes for the link there to try on a free 14-day trial. You can also find it on the X page at Locked On Tech. And thanks so much to the everydayers out there hanging with us all the time on Locked On Texas Tech. Proud to have you as part of the LOTT family. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.